Hi, I'm Staci Neustadt. I am a speech language pathologist and the CEO at Making Sense of Autism, and I'm a student of Susan.
And I'm Susan Golubock. I am a now retired occupational therapist who has worked many, many years after I discovered even my own autism with other autistic individuals. I founded Making Sense of Autism because of my passion to not only understand my brain and how it worked differently, but to try to explain what I've learned to other people so that they're more understanding and therefore more accepting and more accommodating to autistic individuals.
So, our goal is to help you provide the right support without trying to fix autism, but by understanding it. So, whether you're a parent, teacher, therapist, or just someone who wants to learn, you're in the right place. Be sure to subscribe and join us every week. We talk about a new topic. Today, Susan and I want to share something really practical for teachers, for parents. It's our Teach Me the Way I Learn Best handout. So, when we first developed this, it was for schools because we see that when students start school, you don't know the student. And so, learning what their strengths are, their triggers are, their potential strengths, their barriers is going to be really, really important. So, Sue, these might be terms that people haven't heard, or maybe they think of in a different way. I know when I first heard the word strengths, I just thought about like, what does the child do well? Like maybe they're really good at communicating their needs. But share with us your take on all these different areas. And this is our handout.
See, you're right about the fact that strengths are a way of identifying what we do know and what we have learned, and what we can do. But that includes some of the things that most people don't think of as necessarily strengths. Um, so if the child has learned at home that um, uh, if I don't like the way things are going and I sit down and refuse to do anything, or I spit at the person, um, I end up getting out of what I don't want to do, which means that's a learned response. And it's become very strong if they do it every single time because it works every single time. So basically, a strength is anything that you've learned to do, know how to do, can do, that works for you.
Mhm.
And you have to remember that sometimes um, that may not be a strength you want to continue to reinforce, but it is a strength, and you have to recognize it. To change something that's already well learned and well established, you're the one that has to change what you do if you want to change response from them. And that's pretty well established that anytime you want to change something, then you're the one that has to change what you do instead. So if the child is going to sit down and refuse when you make an expectation that they don't like, then instead of making that expectation, you say, okay, here's a choice you have. We can do this, this, or this. Now, all of a sudden, you're not saying you must do that. You haven't chosen for them. You're giving them a choice. Now they don't know how to respond. That's to sit down on what? What am I rebelling against? You've given me a choice. Now you're going to get a different response. Do you see what I'm talking about in terms of viewing a strength? A strength is what they can do and repeatedly or consistently do that serves a purpose.
Yes, and
Um,
I like how you're talking about kind of like thinking out of the box with this because I know as a speech pathologist, when I see a client who is really good at using gestures or really good at nonverbal communication, I'm not going to view that as a deficit. I'm going to view that as a strength. Now, can we build on it? Absolutely. And like you said, provide maybe a different response of, oh, are you trying to tell me this? And then they learn the language to say to instead of those gestures sometimes if they can access it. So I like how you're helping us kind of think out of the box with what strengths would we want a teacher to know about our child so that the teacher can learn to see that strength and then change their responses to it.
right. So we have to think about just not the traditional things we think of as strength, which are, quote, the good stuff that we see that we want to reinforce, but things that they have already learned that you may want to modify. Um, Potential strengths are things it's clear the individual is motivated to learn, wants to be able to do, but is struggling, or they can't do it consistently. Um, and those are the ones that you really want to encourage because the motivation is there to learn. So those are things you want to build on as much as you can. Now, as far as barriers, that's where the things that they're reluctant to try. Well, I don't know. Maybe it's a fear of failure that they're expressing. There are barriers there that are getting in the way of them of their motivation or their ability to be able to do so. And then you talk about triggers. Well, these are things that, oh, you have things that annoy you, that just interruptions. You know, you're so focused on the book you're reading, and then someone demands your attention. And it's like, ah, I was right in the good part. Or they interfere because you're watching a movie. Um, Triggers are things that cause a immediate, in most cases, negative reaction. Um, and you don't want to do that because now you've done is stressed the person. So you want to change what you do so that you don't trigger and cause stress for the person to avoid it. And that pretty much is in a nutshell. If you know that about the person, you know and can think of more effective ways of how to build on what they do know and can do, and how to use that motivation to encourage them to persist in learning new things. Um, how to recognize when something's getting in the way and they're not being successful. What do you need to do to change it? Either make it easier, um, or maybe reframe it, um, and then to avoid the things that stress them, because you can't learn when you're in a state of stress. So those are the important characteristics we're offering with this forum.
We also have this section where you can talk about how your child connects with peers and what you hope your teacher, the aide, the bus driver, the principal, the cafeteria worker, what you want all school staff to see in your child. That's why I feel like this form is so important because I've worked in the schools. Sometimes it does take me a whole quarter to figure out a child, but if I had something like this, I would be 10 steps ahead of knowing what's going to trigger them, knowing what the barriers are, and more importantly, knowing what do they want to learn. I work with a lot of kids who love academic, topics such as numbers and colors because they're so concrete. And so if we know that that's already a strength for a child and we know we can use that in every new concept that we're teaching, especially with numbers, using that in the daily schedule because it's a motivating thing. So there's so many ways that we can use these strengths and potential strengths and being mindful of the barriers and triggers as well. So great tool to start the year. Thank you, Sue.
Thank you, Staci.